And recently, that in the cities in North India, especially Delhi, in the regions around Haryana and Lucknow and Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore, Kolkata, Hyderabad, all these places outside or north of the southern tip of the peninsula, all these places are actually experiencing extreme heat even now. And it is a very contradictory fact, because the southern regions of Kerala and all these places are actually, Lakshadweep is actually started to experience monsoon just one day back. In the very same time, the North India is actually experiencing heat waves. So in this context, we have to understand one particular word, that is actually heat stress. So what is actually heat stress? It is actually a particular time when, if I'm actually walking in that intense sunlight and all, I will be under intense temperature, right? So my body has to cool down. So how actually I cool down? I have to sweat a lot. Most probably the people will sweat a lot. So sweating is actually one of the ways in which the human body actually cools down. But there is one important issue, that is actually humidity. But when the humidity is actually high and the temperature is also high, which means that my sweating will be less. Why? Because the humidity is high. Humidity, what is actually humidity? The amount of water vapor in the atmosphere, in and around the surroundings. So if there is too much of water vapor here, I may not be able to sweat too much. So what if I am not sweating too much? So I may not be able to lose that amount of temperature from my body. My body temperature will remain higher and higher. So ultimately what happens is that I will have dehydration and all. So ultimately that will lead to my collapse, or the person will actually faint or collapse, and it may even lead up to death of that person. So yesterday or 2 days back, there were a lot of informal reports were coming in different newspapers and different channels that around in just one day, in the North Indian region, almost 100 people were killed in just one day, in a very short span of time, because of the heat wave and related heat stress. So please understand the two words separately. Heat wave is actually that intense temperature coming, and heat stress is the reaction of our body that is, and ultimately resulting into the collapse and death of that particular person. And that is, these are the major reasons. And we have to also understand about one important another topic regarding this thing, that is the urban heat island effect. So what are actually urban heat islands? So as you can see from this particular image itself, it is actually a phenomenon seeing in the urban areas itself. And why this particular phenomenon is actually happening here, you can see the temperature graph, right? The temperature is actually going in and around the central city region. So the temperature is actually very high here. The temperature actually falls very low. So what actually happens in the central region of the city is that, because of the multiple construction activities, because of the different concrete buildings and all these things are actually there. So then there is, whenever there is too much buildings are actually happening, which means that there is no path, there is no easy path for the air to move in and around, which means that there will not be any wind. So when there is wind, automatically, which means that the warm air will be transported away. But there is too many buildings, which means that the wind is actually not properly ventilated and all. So all the hot air will be trapped in the area. In addition to that, there is concrete buildings are there. Concrete buildings actually absorb more amount of heat actually, and they store up all the amount of heat there. And in the night, actually, they just releases it. So in both in the daytime as well as in the night time, you experience intense temperature, intense heat energy. And not just the thing, then the roads are actually tarred, or asphalt is there. The roads is actually, we use the word tar, or you can say the asphalt is there. So all the asphalts, all the concrete buildings, all these construction activities are absorbing the heat energy during the daytime. They're actually storing it, they're releasing it in the nighttime. So 24/7, this particular region will have more heat energy, or will be more temperature compared to the surrounding rural areas. So this particular phenomenon is called urban heat island effect. And we have to also understand about the different reasons for this particular urban heat island effect. So you can actually list out the different reasons. For example, we already mentioned about the concrete buildings and all, and the roads which are actually by asphalt. So these are the main reasons in which this particular region is actually more experiencing more temperature. And then the human activities also. For example, different human related activities. We can actually mention about the different industries located in the region. And definitely people are actually buying more and more air conditioners and different equipments and all, air conditioners plus different machines. All these things are actually happening in the urban areas. So you have to know that when you buy an AC, definitely your house or your room will be cooler. But ultimately what happens is that this AC is actually taking away that heat energy and expelling it to the outside of your home. So if you have 10 ACs in one particular locality, all the houses will be of cooler nature, but the outside all the houses, that entire region will be warmer and warmer. So that is one important thing, because of the machineries and the different ACs and all. and there is actually very less vegetation in, and all the greeneries, all the plants and all the trees are actually cut down in that extreme urban area. So because of less vegetation also, because whenever there is vegetation, automatically there will be tree canopy will be there, the sunlight will not be able to fall down to the earth, so there will be shade in that particular land area, so automatically it will be cooler area. But now when there is no trees at all, the vegetation less, which means that the amount of heat energy reaching the land will be much more. And next thing is actually about the building density. We already about the buildings. So when the building density is more, which means that the ventilation will be poor, the air will not be properly ventilated, moving and all, airflow reduced, which means that the heat energy will be trapped in the particular locality. So what are the different solutions we can actually take up in this particular thing? We can actually look into that and we can identify the solutions. For example, planned urbanization, it should not be any, should not cut down unnecessarily all the trees and all these things. Maintain the trees so that we can maintain the shade, maintain the coolness. And there are actually more and more technologies coming which are actually more or less energy efficient. And then the roofs of the houses can also be very important. For example, if your house is actually having dark roofs or dark terrace, etc., that is absorbing more amount of sunlight or temperature from the sun, heat energy from the sun. But if you have a reflective rooftop, for example, silver coated sheets and all, you can actually use it in the rooftop. It can actually reflect more amount of heat energy. That means your place of living will be automatically much more cooler than the surroundings. And last but not least, in this particular topic, we have to understand about one last word that is actually called heat index. So a lot of different agencies such as our IMD also releases this particular thing, heat index, Indian Meteorological Department, IMD. So this is actually one example of that heat index. So what does this heat index ultimately mean? That suppose if you have a temperature of around 30 degrees Celsius in that locality, but this is actually temperature, this is actually humidity. Humidity is actually rising. So this is temperature, this is humidity. Suppose if you have a 30-degree temperature, but the humidity is actually 70%, which means that I am actually experiencing temperature of around 35 degrees Celsius. The actual temperature is 30 only, but the humidity is actually 70%, which means that I feel it will be something like 35. I feel it is actually 35, but actually it is 30 only, but I feel that it is actually 35. So that is actually the relation between humidity as well as temperature. So it does not mean only if you have temperature 30, it does not mean you will be happy. So sometimes the humidity will be very high, which means that automatically, even if you are actually 30, you will feel that you are actually at 40 degrees Celsius. So that is actually called the heat index. And that is the concept of what is called the heat index. So the perception or what actually the body feels like, that is actually called the heat index based on the relative humidity also. All right, so that is the topic of heat stress, urban heat island, and heat index.